So I stood holding a bucket, letting my head drain. 3 hours later, she comes back and she goes, "That's it for today. Thanks for the bucket." Ooh, wow. Sets it down, undoes the thing, leaves the needle in the 4 inches of tubing, puts like a clothespin on it, and she goes, "That's it. Come back tomorrow for your second session." Like, we have to do this again? She's like, "Yes." That was session 1. The bucket was about half full, so there was about 3 liters in there. The bag of medicine was this fucking big. I don't know what was in the bucket, but I had lost a lot of blood and a lot of fluid, and then she's like, "See you tomorrow." So I'm like, oh great, now I get to drive. Driving after you've lost a lot of blood, not the smartest thing to do. I should have driven right home, but I didn't. The needle is still in my arm with 4 inches of tubing and a clothespin on the end closing the tube. I have to leave it there so tomorrow they can hook up the second bag of medicine. In my infinite wisdom, I think, I better stop by work. So I go to work, I go into the back door, I'm sweating, I'm pale, I've lost a lot of fluid, with the dangling needle and tube from my arm. And I go to the office, I talk to the man, like, "Hi," and they look up at me like I was, feces that had been microwaved, just like, "Why are you here?" Because my arm is all cakey blood, I'm pale, the cock on my head has gone down, but you can still see a bump on my forehead. And he's like, my manager goes, "Why are you here? Why don't you go home?" I'm like, "Oh, I'm going to need 3 days off." He goes, "Okay, I believe that. We could have done this over the phone, though. You could have just called this in." I'm like, "I got some tubing." "Yeah. Well, go away. You're gross. Come back in 3 days." So I went home, sleeping with a 4-inch needle and 4 inches of tubing out of your arm. Trying to get comfortable when you fall asleep, you can't. Because no matter how you're laying, you still have metal stuck in your arm. And then the tube, it's not fun. The next day I got up, I went to the hospital. My drainage session was at 10:30. I got there at 10, figured show up early. But it was one of those days where, I don't know if you've ever been in the waiting room at a hospital, and everybody who doesn't speak English or has a child with a head wound decided to show up about 20 minutes before I did. So the whole waiting room was children with head wounds and people that didn't have English as their first language. So they're kind of nervous, they're not really sure how to fill out anything. I'm like, oh God, I'm gonna die in the waiting room. And I wanted to be compassionate because I went in and I signed in. They're like, "Okay, great. Go sit down. We'll get to you as soon as we can. You're on a list." I'm like, oh no. But I found that I felt better giving people dirty looks because I have a needle sticking out of my arm. So clearly I'm not there just like, "I think I have a head cold. Hey, check it out." So just staring at people, I made them feel really uncomfortable. And that made me feel better for some reason. After 2 hours, they said, "Okay, well, we're going to take your vitals first, and then you can have your drainage session." She goes, "As part of your vitals, we have to take your blood pressure." Blood pressure is when they put that rubber sleeve on your arm, and they puff it up to see your blood pressure. She began to put it on my arm with the needle hanging out of it. She started pulling it up. She got to about my elbow. She's like, "Ooh, this is gonna be rough." I'm like, "Hey, just while we're talking, how about you do that on the arm that doesn't have a fucking needle sticking out of it?" And she's like, "I didn't think it would be an issue." There's a needle in my arm. Why would you want to put pressure on the arm with a needle in it? She's like, "Well, gonna be a baby about it, I guess we can do the other arm." "Okay, I'm gonna be a baby." "Wah! I'm gonna be a baby about it. Let's use the arm that doesn't have a fucking needle in it." She's like, fine. Ruin everything. So we took my blood pressure, and apparently I was still alive. I got into my room. We did the drainage for 4 hours. And then they said, well, we want to make sure that the sinus has decompressed enough. So I got a CAT scan and an MRI, which is fun. If you've ever had a CAT scan, you know how much fun one is. I got 2. Jealous. And then they said, well, your thing is shrunk enough, you can go home. And then they gave me pills that would have choked a horse. A horse that gave hippopotamuses blowjobs for a living. Just these giant fucking pills. And they gave me those and I went home. And that's having a compacted sinus. So there. I don't have anything to that bit. I just wanted to share my pain with you.